Hello and welcome to another segment of Western Wisconsin Journal. I'm Jamie Johnson, the government and political correspondent. And today, because it is spring election time, we have a candidate for Hudson Mayor, Liz Malanaphy. Liz, welcome to the show.
Hi, Jamie. Thanks very much for having me. I appreciate it.
Well, and if folks are thinking a little bit deja vu, we have done this before, haven't we?
Yes, we have.
You ran for mayor 3 years ago.
I did.
Okay. So rather than just go over some of the same things, but we do need to recap because we have new viewers. Not everyone saw the interview from 3 years ago. But we'll get into the why you're running part and what you think are important issues. Let's first talk about your background here in the city of Hudson.
Okay, so moved here in 1999. Have 5 kids, so I spent a lot of time with my 5 kids and all of their friends, early in our life here. And then as they started getting into school, I started jumping into volunteering and doing a lot of work with the Hudson School District. I think the earliest work that I did was with Destination Imagination, which
I remember
know
that,
you know
yes.
about that.
Yeah,
so that's a creativity, critical thinking skills program. Been running that for 25 years since we moved here, and that's crazy fun. It opens up those really creative nerve pathways. So that's kind of what I was doing when I was a stay-at-home mom. And then as soon as my kids were old enough to, they were all in school, I got a job with Turning Point in River Falls. That was my first sort of out-of-the-house job. It was a volunteer coordinator position. And then when that was kind of a lot driving back and forth, so then I got a job in the Hudson School District. So I actually have been doing reading and math intervention and behavioral intervention at EP Rock for about 12 years. After I ran last time for mayor, I had gotten into a master's program at UW-Milwaukee. The master's program is called Sustainable Peace Building. So it's really systems thinking, looking at all different aspects of society, housing, healthcare, public education, a little bit of everything. So I've been doing that program. I wrapped that up this spring. I have loved that. And while I'm doing that, I'm actually a long-term sub right now at EP Rock for somebody that's on maternity leave. So that's in the special ed department, which is pretty important to have a teacher in there that knows the kids.
Right.
So that on top of the MSP program. And then through the MSP program, I actually took 2 part-time jobs that I thought were great opportunities. One is working with the Wisconsin DNR and a firm called Jacobs Engineering, which is a lead line inventory. So all the water lines throughout the state, all the municipalities have to report on whether or not they have lead lines. So I've been traveling around the state doing that. And then I got a fellowship in my program that is with a nonprofit called Forward Together Wisconsin. So there are a lot of layers to my life right now, and a lot of things that I did too along the way within the community. I did creative programming at the FIPS, some at the library, some in the school district, community ed, and of course none of those are politician.
Yeah.
None of those are politics, and I'm a reluctant politician. It's not my favorite thing to think about being a politician, but what those many efforts have done has really been equipped me with creativity, the idea that you can implement programming across different areas of whether it be education or society or your community. It's really allowed me to kind of form those collaborative processes in my brain, and that's kind of the way that I look at things now, is how we can all work together for the good of everybody. So it's a little bit, I've kind of dabbled in a little bit of everything.
Yes,
we were talking.
We were talking off camera about that, and just running through the things. I remember, I think your kids overlap in the ages of my kids. In fact, I think some of them were in the same grade. But anyway, yeah, because you mentioned your exposure to education, the arts, the environment, and of course, then also though advancing the interests of different sectors and how those demographic groups interact and so forth. So it's not your traditional political science background, right?
Right. And I think those were, those 2 jobs I mentioned that I got through my program, basically the Wisconsin DNR and the Forward Together, those are more policy. Those were really, and that's the reason that I took them. They were a challenge to me. They weren't the things that I was used to doing or not really in my wheelhouse or my favorite things to do, but a lot of policy, a lot of numbers, a lot of adhering to requirements and restrictions. And so I really felt like that would be a great experience for me, and it has been. It's been really interesting. And it's allowed me to travel through the state of Wisconsin and actually see what other communities are doing in really creative ways to solve some of their problems and issues. So yeah, it's a good time to not be a career politician. I mean, I think our society is accepting the fact that not everybody has to have been in politics for their whole life to get elected. So,
well, let's talk about the fact that you're running a second time for this position against the same incumbent. Separate out your motivation, or putting that aside for 1 second. What do you feel the Hudson mayor responsibilities ought to be? I mean, how they've been exercised for the last 9, 12 years, whatever, is one thing, but looking at a city that might have Liz Malanaphy as its mayor, what would you see as your major responsibilities, and where would you focus your time?
I think this is one thing that I feel pretty passionately about. I think we have people nowadays that are elected, and they immediately forget about the 50% or the 48% or the 46% of the people who maybe didn't vote for them but still are important members of their constituency.
Right.
And we are, we're pretty polarized, and the mayoral position is a nonpartisan position, and I really believe that should be, local politics are really, to me, our last best hope for civil discourse, for actually listening to everybody in your city, in all of your constituents and citizens, and then implementing ideas according to what everybody wants. So we have a comprehensive plan which was developed, I think, in 2021, and it was developed for, I think, 2040 as a goal, and that exists. It's our North Star. It has about 7 principles and priorities, and the current mayor and council do a great job really working towards some of those, but some of those have been just kind of a little swept under the rug, I think. And
do you have
almost
examples?
Forgotten. Well, I think affordable housing. Housing was a big one that is in that comprehensive plan, and that has yet to really be thoroughly examined and taken apart and dissected and put back together in a way that works for us. And I think environmental stewardship is a big one that we haven't been very active on. Those two for sure, and retaining our small town charm and our downtown businesses, but also, while we're bringing in tourists, remembering that our citizens are the people who live here, and there are things that they want too that might be a little different. So,
okay, well, let's transition then to motivation. Why? I mean, you tried once for this position, were not successful, running against the same person again. So what's your motivation in 2025 for becoming mayor in Hudson?
It's pretty much the same as it was last time. I think we live in a democracy. We deserve at least 2 candidates. I would love to see more candidates. I'd love to see a primary or a final 5 voting or ranked choice voting. And I think our local government, as I said, is kind of our last best hope to engage with our citizens and each other. And right now, I think I just felt like we needed another candidate. So I decided to run, and I want to be engaged in our local government. And right now, there is not really another way for me to be engaged. There are plenty of really good school board candidates. I really like my District 5 alderperson. I agree with what she does, what she says, how she votes. So
and that is?
Sarah Brook.
Okay.
So I wouldn't want to run against her. So I'm not going to run against her. We have 6 alderpersons, 6 districts. I can't run in any of the other districts. And so this is one of the things that I would actually like to do if I were to become mayor, or even if I'm not, if I don't become mayor. I would love to see our council expanded to an odd number of representatives. And many municipalities that are about the same size as we are around the state actually have at-large representatives. And an at-large representative is elected from the whole population. So it's similar to school board, except within the Hudson City limits, and yet it is a person who can be elected by everybody in the city. So similar to the mayor. So if there had been an at-large seat, that is something that I probably would have run for.
Right.
Because you take somebody like myself, I live downtown. that's my district, but I work up at EP Rock, so I know a whole other population. And those kids at EP Rock and those families and the teachers, they're from other districts. But I see what they need. I see what is important to them, and I could represent them probably almost equally as well as my own district.
I have seen other nonpartisan governmental entities like school boards and city councils where they have both district assigned or delineated representatives, but then at large as well. Those at large obviously are trying to represent the community as a whole as opposed to a specific geographic area.
Right, and I think the most important thing about that to me, and this is where I differ than the current mayor, I think, is I would not want to be the deciding vote. I don't think that's an appropriate, I feel like that's, as a mayor, you're kind of a mediator, you're a facilitator for these conversations that you're supposed to be having, and I don't feel like I would want to be standing there with that final deciding vote, because a council of 6, at best we get a tie often.
Right.
And actually this happened at the most recent city council meeting. The mayor had some great things to say about an issue that was on the table, but when he finished that conversation, he said, this is how I'll be voting. And so that kind of takes that, it's really kind of a strange power dynamic, and I'm not sure it's really appropriate for a mayor. I feel that a mayor should serve in a different way.
Okay.
So that's.
So you would change, and that you're being responsive to my question, which is the mayor's responsibilities, and those can be changed based on ordinances. Still got to follow the state statute guidelines.
Absolutely.
But so let's get into specifics as far as looking at the city and how it's been run. Do you feel like, for example, there's any areas where the city could reduce spending without cutting services, or do you see a need for cutting any spending? What would be how do you look at how the tax dollars are, doled out, so to speak, and how they're, assigned to different areas of city tasks and functions?
Well, one of the things I've been asking about is whether or not our city accessed like the bipartisan Infrastructure Act or the Inflation Reduction Act funding. There's funding available, or there was funding available. A lot of cities around the state have accessed that for projects within their cities. I don't know that, I haven't really gotten an answer. I don't know that we have, but I think that there are opportunities for grants. There are opportunities for some federal funding. We need to have people really looking at that, researching it. Again, it comes down to engaging more people. We have a lot of really smart, educated people in a lot of different areas in Hudson. So that's one thing that I would like to see is some people that serve in just that way, that always have their finger on the pulse of what funding might be available. And I haven't sat down with the budget and gone over it as like the mayor has, I'm sure, but I think sometimes it's really great to get a new person in who's going to ask a lot of questions and not just say this is always the way that we've done it, because that does make people think.
So get a new set of eyes looking at the priorities and so forth. But as you're talking to voters and stuff, are you hearing anyone that thinks we're being wasteful in any areas of the city budget, spending where we don't need to?
People always want to keep their taxes low, and that's so do I. I'm a homeowner too, and our taxes do a lot of different things for our community, including our schools. That's kind of the biggest one. So I think I don't really hear a lot of people talking about wasteful spending. I hear people asking more questions about why did they do it this way, or when is my street going to be fixed, or what's going on with these trees. And again, I think that comes down to that civic engagement. I'd like to be able to answer people's questions. I'd like to be able to ask about their ideas. I'd like to be able to look at taxes and say, is there a way we can grandfather in people who are older, who have lived in this community longer? Tax rates are going up. We don't want to price them out of their home, but we have people moving into newer properties that are fairly expensive. Is there a way to kind of offset that, those tax rates? So I can't honestly, I don't think there have been things that I've heard that people are really complaining about.
Okay.
But I think it would not hurt to engage more people in
Well,
the process.
So with the issues that you would address in the next 3 years, it's a 3-year term, what would you see your priorities being then?
Well, I think, you know, the number one priority, and we're looking at our schools, and we're looking at declining enrollment, and we're looking at a community where the land and the home prices are becoming, you know, pretty exclusive. It's really difficult for young families to move here, and for our teachers to live here and work here, and for our nurses and our police officers and the people who serve this community to also live here. So I think for me, affordable housing is probably the number one priority. And I think we're one of the only cities in St. Croix County, cities, you know, not towns or villages, but cities that hasn't worked with Habitat for Humanity to bring some habitat homes or a small habitat development to Hudson. It's hard when we have, you know, the development that we have is a lot of it is kind of luxury or a little bit higher priced. And I know, you know, we have people who come over from Minnesota, maybe they retire here, maybe they have an apartment a condo downtown, a luxury condo downtown, and they are paying taxes, but maybe they're not going to vote for a school referendum or vote to invest that in the community. So I think affordable housing and finding places and ways for people who work here to live here is a huge priority of mine. And then again, you know, just civic engagement, adequate representation, and making sure, you know, we have a number of boards that are mayor appointed, boards and councils in our city government. There's a kind of a small concentration of power. There are a lot of people who have served on those for years. And I think it would be great to bring some new people in. I've heard a lot of great ideas in the community about housing and about, you know, businesses, things they'd like to see come to the city, about the library, a permanent home for the library and the amount of space that the library would love to have, because they serve this community so well, they should have. Those are issues that are really important. And I think, you know, environmental stewardship is huge to me, because we live on this beautiful river and now it's an impaired body of water. And we need to do something, because the river is why Hudson is here. And the people of this city love the river, and we need to be better stewards of it, in my opinion. So those are, you know, those are.
Do you have any like specific programs maybe you'd like to see? Obviously, there was a big investment in Lakefront Park and the boat launch and you know, the boardwalk,
right,
and everything. So, what would you do beyond those?
Well, I would have done those differently.
Okay.
So I think that boat launch, you know, it's enormous. It's great. It brings a lot of people to town to go boating, but you know, the runoff from an expanse of concrete or asphalt like that is heat pollution for the river in the summer months, and it takes a lot with it. The runoff, including just the amount of water that runs off of it. And I've heard and seen and read about municipalities that have like holding tanks where the water pools in the tanks and then is used for irrigation for the grass or the flowers in Lakefront Park. So that's something that I think it would have been great if they looked at that. Maybe more permeable. I know there's some permeable concrete, but mostly it's just a pretty hard surface that water runs off of.
Okay.
And the floating dock is great, but I think in the spring, you know, it wasn't useful for quite a long time because of the flooding, which again, we have all this water that runs downhill. So I think it would be smart of us to look at that runoff and how it affects the river in the spring months. And we should have interpretive signage down there. We should be telling everybody who comes here the value of that river, what it is, one of the original wild and scenic rivers after the Clean Water Act and after, and you know, and species that are endemic to the St. Croix. There are mussels in the St. Croix that are not found anywhere except maybe one other river. Runs into the Mississippi, you know. It's a really, really important part of our community.
Well, and your first priority that you mentioned about affordable housing kind of dovetails into one of the questions here about your position on residential and/or commercial development in Hudson. At the current time, there is no land to put affordable housing on. So what would be your position when it comes to annexation? Hudson has only two directions it can go, south and east. Can't go west and can't go north.
Right.
So what would you do in that regard?
Well, and I'm just going to go way out on a limb here and throw this out, but I think there is land in Hudson that we could potentially look at for affordable housing, and one of the one of the solutions that I have, and I just shared with the school district, is our schools, some of them sit on pretty big pieces of land that might have small chunks that could be sold for some housing units, whether they be little row houses or a couple sweet little Habitat for Humanity homes. So I think in terms of affordable housing, we have to be a little more creative about it. We do have space, we just have to look around. And then in terms of annexation, that I think the potential there, to me, I think of a development in North Carolina that's a Habitat development that my brother has worked on. And it's called Weaver's Grove, and it's over 200 homes, and half of them are affordably priced, workforce housing. And then it has some commercial too. So it's like its own small development, but the requirements of that development were that they integrate commercial and affordable housing. And in the state of Wisconsin, I know we have a couple different acts that were passed that say that a municipality cannot require a developer to have a certain percentage of affordable housing. Cannot. And I think they refer to them as the landlord's law or the developer's law. So, but I think as a city, we can really look at that and try to work with some developers. I met a couple throughout the state of Wisconsin in my travels who are working with tribal nations who are working to do that very thing. So we look at something like Weaver's Grove, and you can Google it, you'll find it. It's an amazing
Weaver's Grove,
project.
North Carolina.
Yeah.
What about expanding, residential and commercial development? One of the things that's preventing our school district from having a total AAA1 rating, we got a double A, large A, and small A, whatever, the one step down from AAA. And the one thing that stops us is that the insufficient commercial land in our district. So we have 3 full industrial parks at the current time, and there's, would there be in your priority somewhere, the planning for a 4th?
I think, again, land would be an issue, but obviously that's something that we'd have to have a conversation about. And I'm imagining all of the things that are in our industrial park, amazing businesses and corporations up there, and Phillips Medicize. I know I was recently at Camp St. Croix. I know their volunteers come across to work with the Camp St. Croix farm. So I imagine something like that, those kinds of partnerships could be really effective for organizations and entities, our schools and nonprofits, and also really serve that purpose to bring some new corporations to town.
About on the residential side, mentioning the affordable housing and so forth, there is, the potential for the school district is looking into selling its UU property, and there's going to be an application for annexation of around 100 acres, which again could provide a couple hundred, maybe upwards of 300 units that could be used for residences of families with kids that would be in our schools. So would that be something that you would have some flexibility? I know our mayor was on yesterday when we taped his segment. He was mentioning how the city has not in the past historically gone with majority annexation, but has required unanimous. So if there's even one property owner that's objecting, they wouldn't. So how would you feel about that?
Well, I'm not sure there have been community conversations convened around that. I think that would maybe be my first step, is to bring everybody, all the stakeholders together, and to really talk about it, a dialogue about it, not just guesswork about what people are thinking, but really bringing people together and talking about what's at stake, what the benefits would be, what the drawbacks are. And that UU property is something that I put in a communication to the district administration about this idea, the idea to partner with Habitat. And so I know that's out there. That's a difficult property, and it's been for a while, it's kind of been on that docket, I know. So that to me just really speaks to the need to have a conversation about it.
Right. Yeah, and like you said, there's the North Carolina development that you mentioned, where there's kind of an assigned percentage, if you will, that would be more affordable. As the seller, the school district can't put those kind of caveats. They either sell it or they don't. But in granting housing permits and so forth, a municipality would have that ability to set some kind of parameters as well. So green space and all the other things. So, all right, let's move on to, we mentioned the mayor's responsibilities. We talked about spending. Let's move to infrastructure. There have been projects in the last 5-6 years. 2nd Street, which was Highway 35, that was kind of a state project. Vine Street was tore up for the longest time, and there's sewer pipes that have been made of wood that needed to be worked on and replaced. That was all part of some of those street developments. But now there's talk about bridges, both Hagan Street or 11th Street and Carmichael. So what would be your position on how to attack the infrastructure plan for maintenance or redevelopment, if you will, whether short-term or long-term?
Well, I'm guessing that some of those plans are already in the works. And this is where, as the mayor, I have a city administrator, I have an assistant city administrator, I have public works people, there are educated, well-educated, really intelligent people in place already who are probably working on that. So my first step would be, tell me about this, tell me where we're at, tell me what your thoughts are and with your expertise, and then I will look at it with my fresh eyes, my new set of questions, and we'll go forward with it. So again, I think of the 11th Street Bridge, and I'm not sure exactly, where we are, what stage we're in. I remember there was a process for voting, for community engagement about what we wanted that to look like, whether there'd be a roundabout, whether there'd be stoplights, whether there'd be bike lanes. So the results of that are somewhere, I'm sure. And to me, I kind of look at that as one of those projects that, what if we could have tapped into some of the federal funding, bipartisan funding that was available for that? Was it not, as they say, shovel ready? They have the term shovel ready. So you got to be ready to go with these projects so you can apply for this grant and you have all the details and you have the timeline. Are there things that we could have shovel ready to see if maybe, honestly, there's going to be midterm elections, there's going to be a pendulum swing. We better be ready with things that we could apply for.
Right. Yeah, at least in the next 2 years, doesn't look like there's going to be a lot of federal spending available.
Right, not in the next 2 years. So, but there's still, that was a bipartisan act, so there still is, the state of Wisconsin has some of that money secured already, and we're a pretty affluent community, so we might not be eligible for it. But I think, my answer to people, when people ask me that, what are you going to do about this, or do you have the expertise in that? I'm a smart person. I'm a fast learner. But I know a lot of people who are way smarter than me. And, those people in our city are doing some really good work already.
Delegate to the experts, right?
I think that kind of is, that definitely, I don't need to have control over everything. That's not what my idea of a mayor is, so.
All right, well, let's talk about other, the meat and potato issues that people expect out of a municipality. What about public safety? Do you feel like, you mentioned some of the other priorities about housing, environmental stewardship, civic engagement. Do you see problems with our public safety here in Hudson where that needs to be a top, focus?
Well, I just saw in the paper this morning that there was, a really tragic issue that happened up. It sounds like maybe a domestic issue where somebody ended up dead. And my thoughts have been with that family, those people all day. So you look at something like that and you think, are we safe? It seems to me that it sounded like an isolated incident. And so in terms of public safety, I've walked around this community all my life at night, down by the river, all over downtown. I think public safety, our police force does a great job. I feel really safe. I know.
So you don't feel like it needs to be an area where we need heavy new resources, either in personnel or equipment investment?
Well, I know that we're going to have, the investment in the new police facility.
Sure.
So that's great. That's going to be, that'll be a great place for them to be, and hopefully they'll have all the resources they need there. That is not something I've heard from people in my conversations.
That they're either overstaffed or understaffed
yeah,
or anything.
I think, again, the experts, the people, I don't take issue with what our city council or mayor has done in those instances.
Okay.
I take issue with how it's been done and how it's been decided sometimes, but I think, public safety and safety it's a bit of a dog whistle. I think really people, it can be a fear kind of thing, and I don't know anybody who feels really fearful about living in Hudson. I know people who don't lock their doors, don't lock their cars, and I think knowing our neighbors, really traversing the city, getting to know different communities goes a long way toward making you understand that it is a pretty safe community. So
another area where people has generated a lot of discussion and focus has been the library. And because the police will be moving out of there and going to a new facility, do you see again a need for the city to have a lot of focus, or do you think that the right people are in the right place and the plan is a good one as far as where the direction the library is headed, whether it's funding or long-term plans for expansion?
Right. Well, I mean, I just spoke with Shelley Tugas just last week, I think, and Shelley was a DI person. She's a creative mind, very creative mind, really, really knows what she's doing. They're in a lot better position than they were the last time I ran. I mean, she felt like things were pretty dire the last time, and she's feeling like they're sitting pretty well right now where they're at, but also acknowledging that it would be great to expand into the rest of that building. So again, to figure out how to fund that, it's a big question mark. But I think that library does so much for this community in terms of programming, in terms of a gathering space, in terms of what it could be to as a sort of a senior center or a gathering place for seniors. It's one of the most important institutions we have, and I think it's in a beautiful, iconic building.
Right.
And right down by the river, which allows people who come to it to enjoy that too at the same time, and across from the FIPS. And there's a lot of partnerships that those, the library and the FIPS, we just did that last summer. We did Scrappy, the garbage fish on the lawn of the FIPS. I was out there and we worked through the library to bring kids, homeschool kids who are in programming at the library over to work on Scrappy. So the library being there, being what it is, being big enough is a pretty big priority too. But I know a lot of really great people are working on that as well, and the mayor is one of them, so I would say that.
Well, speaking of downtown, two issues. Do you see anything that needs to be done with parking on one hand, and then do you think that redevelopment should be taking place, whether it's at Lakefront or somewhere else?
So the parking issue, I mean, this is something that I do hear. I have a lot of people just kind of asking. They think that I know because I'm involved in, local issues. Why we can't park in the boat launch parking lot during the 6 months or, whatever, 5 months, 6 months of the year that it's not used for boating, which is a great question. It's a huge parking lot. And for some reason, and I know there probably is a good one, we can't use that space when it could be a lot of parking. And parking always comes up, and when the old fire station was torn down for parking, it broke my heart. And I was waging a little one-person campaign to try to save it because I could see it as an open air market that had windows that would close and be an event space in the winter. And I could also see a small parking structure, maybe 2 or 3 stories, tucked in that back corner of that lot, because it would have been a perfect space for it. And you could have accessed it from the 3rd Street Hill and then exited it down on the ground level or vice versa. But we didn't have a conversation about it. And all of a sudden the fire station was gone, and they said asbestos was part of the problem. But there's asbestos being taken out of schools. There's asbestos in a lot of different buildings.
Well, you can still put a
parking
structure in that
back
space.
corner. Yeah, if you walk by that parking lot, that back corner is just You know, you can park on the ground level, but the rest of it is big walls, and to me, kind of wasted space. And it could be, I mean, it could actually be decent looking. It could have some plantings on the top and
Right.
2 or 3 or 4 levels of parking. So yeah, I think, you know.
Any other redevelopment that you're thinking?
You know, Lakefront Park, I think we talked about that a little bit, the stewardship issue. Lakefront Park should have, to me, they should definitely have, if not like an interpretive center down there, like something where people can come and take classes and enjoy the river and learn about the river, then just interpretive signage that takes people along, kind of similar to the historical signs, but along the river, talking about all the things that are important about the river. I think we could use native prairie plantings down there, and you know, it's a migratory corridor for a lot of birds and pollinators. That was one of the things about the boat launch parking lot that broke my heart, was they chopped down a bunch of trees that that the Urban Forestry Board had just planted, that were all planted with the intention of being for migratory birds and insects. And I remember going running, I think it was the morning after the election, and all these trees were just dead on the ground, like chopped down on the ground. And I didn't ever hear a conversation about that.
Okay.
I didn't ever hear about
Right.
public input for that. You know, I think there was funding available through the TID,
So,
TIF.
and that goes back to what your priority was civic engagement.
Engagement, yep.
All right, so we got a minute left, but is there any issues that you want to make sure that you addressed here that we hadn't touched upon already?
No, I think, you know, I think we need to engage people in their local government. There are so many people who have told me that they applied to be on a board, but they never got a reply to it. We have people on our boards that the mayor appoints, and they are some of the same people on 2 or 3 boards. I don't think that the mayor should have to be, appointing his family members. There are so many people in this city who are looking for ways to engage. We need to make it open and inviting to them and tell them what those ways are, and just really have a constant conversation about how everybody has something to contribute.
Okay.
So that's the big thing for me.
And how would people be able to get a hold of you? Is there a website or Facebook page or social media if they wanted to learn more about your candidacy or where you might stand if they had questions for you?
Yeah, I am on Instagram. Liz M for Mayor is on Instagram, and then I do have a website.
Liz what?
Liz M for Mayor.
Liz M.
So LIZM for Mayor. I'd like the word F. Mayor.
F-O-R.
Yeah, that's
Okay.
the Instagram. So that would be a little @ symbol before the Liz M.
Yeah.
If you're on Instagram, and then I have a website that I made myself. I did it the last time I ran, and I'm a terrible. I'm not a technology person, but I made that website. So when you look at it, don't judge me for, how it looks necessarily, but all the information, the things I think are important, things I think that need to happen, stories, anecdotes, they're all on that website on various pages. So you can find me there.
Email?
The email actually is on that website. So there's a contact form on that website. I somehow pulled that off. You can contact me
So they can get the
through.
website.
Yeah.
What is the
Well, the website is also lizmformayor.org.
Okay.
.org.
.org.
So lizmformayor.org. And actually you'll see I have been walking around the city hanging door hangers on everybody's doors. I literally have been doing it, 80% of it myself. Now I've got some great friends who are helping me, but it has a little QR code on it.
Okay.
And that accesses my website, takes you right to it.
Excellent.
So anybody who I've gotten some emails about people's ideas. We've had great little conversations via email from that. So
Excellent.
yeah.
Well, Liz, thanks for coming on the show. And good luck with your run for mayor. And I want to also thank our viewers for watching another segment of Western Wisconsin Journal. I'm Jamie Johnson. Keep watching.